was picking up steam in North America's countercultural communities. Toronto was home to one of the biggest of these institutions, an anomaly by the name of Rochdale College. Anecdotes from former residents of Rochdale College talk of an extremely permissive environment, and indeed there was little formality to the lifestyle and education that was offered. Despite the noble intent by its founders, what resulted was a culture marked by criminal activity and a sense of truancy amongst inhabitants. The building that constituted Rochdale College has since been repurposed, and the only evidence of its sordid past is a sculpture sitting at the tower base on Bloor Street. So how was life at Rochdale College? Toronto had been experiencing a housing crisis for its students around 1958. One University of Toronto student by the name of Howard Adelman proposed a cooperative housing solution. He dubbed this Rochdale, referencing one of the first cooperative communities located in England. The idea was that the inhabitants would come together to share in the building's upkeep, including cleaning and other general maintenance. Mr. Adelman was a philosopher with high hopes for this new community, offering a different kind of education. Rochdale College would certainly be a different kind of university, though not in the way Mr. Adelman had planned. 1964 marked the date of official incorporation. The building, which became Rochdale College, was mortgaged at a price considered to be a good deal. Zoning officials provided far more space than originally planned for given its proximity to a main road. The 18-story tower was designed in the brutalist architecture style, and construction continued well into 1968. Though tenant composition was initially mostly University of Toronto students, a workers' strike halted construction for up to half a year, by which point most of the students found other accommodations. Project planners scrambled to fill rooms, resulting in a mixed body of residents. This didn't deter Mr. Adelman, who was enticed by the fact that the building's steep property taxes were avoidable by registering it as an educational institution. Though Rochdale College was to be self-funded, rent was inexpensive and tuition non-existent. Rather than hire tenured professors, Rochdale's curriculum took a more lax approach by utilizing resource people meant to lead discourses. Students could debate any number of topics with their peers and resource people, and there was great freedom as to how individuals could structure their education. This all seemed promising on paper, but this lack of formality would be put to the test the following year. Despite still being under construction, the college managed to meet the spring 1968 deadline. Finished living spaces had about 12 bedrooms, referred to as ashrams, along with a kitchen, bathroom, and common room occupants shared and were responsible for. Nudity was permitted on the rooftop. One notable asset of the college was a property near South Algona, dubbed the Golden Lake Campus. Rochdale itself had lingering construction issues, meaning heat and plumbing were unreliable. Individual bedrooms were also known for being exceptionally small. Mr. Adelman lamented that these setbacks made the building less appealing to students, while increasing the appeal to transient people and hippies. At one point, 20% of the population were American draft dodgers escaping Vietnam. These kinds of occupants moved Rochdale farther and farther away from the academic ideals it was expected to meet. With such an eclectic mix of residents, Rochdale College began developing the countercultural atmosphere it became known for. It wasn't long before a pirate radio station was started on 92 FM, or as its call letter spelt, CRUD. Though the equipment was crude, this didn't stop CRUD from being the subject of many telecommunications complaints from the outside. One former resident and proprietor by the name of Robert Rosie Robotham described that the drug culture came about as a natural consequence of the environment. Many of the American draft dodgers were hiding out under questionable immigration status and had few opportunities to make money otherwise. Given the mixed composition of residents and hands-off teaching structure, little academic work was accomplished. Instead, mock degrees were sold at costs ranging from $25 to $100, with proceeds supposedly benefiting the whole building. Programs which did exist featured a mix of unusual disciplines, such as survivalism, hotel management, drugs, theater, chess, lasers, and revolution. Some residents even recall being awarded degrees in things they made up. It wasn't until the 1970s, however, that Rochdale College began spiraling out of control.
Rochdale, in the sense that it was an apartment building, and a very open apartment building, very communal in nature, was like living in a village in the heart of a city. It had all the advantages of a city, being in the center of Toronto, in the downtown area. It had all the advantages of a village. In the sense you formed lasting friendships and relationships. You knew who your next door neighbor was. You met him frequently. You gossiped with him. Being outside of the building, again, is...
The new decade seemed promising for alternative education advocates. Rochdale's sister site, Tartu College, opened, which outlasted its counterpart in functions to this day. At this point, Rochdale was hitting its peak as the largest free college in North America, due in large part to the blossoming drug culture that took hold. The supposedly democratic nature of decision-making meant little was ever agreed upon. By 1971, Rochdale had taken on the reputation as, quote, North America's largest drug supermarket. Hash, marijuana, and LSD were among the most available substances. Rumor has it that rock stars such as Steve Miller and Alice Cooper partied at the establishment. Certain apartments became known as establishments in and of themselves, with one source reading, quote, 7-Eleven was an after-hours club, located on the 7th floor in room 711. It was dark, it was sleazy, it was a home away from home for grifters and rounders. When Rochdale appeared threatened by oversight from Central Mortgage and Housing, residents raised money to fight any legal challenges that may put it at risk. But Rochdale was about to attract more attention than it could possibly hope for, which imperiled it more than ever before. In December 1971, a 22-year-old mother named Marika Sokolowski was murdered on the 3rd floor. Police found the body during an unrelated investigation. Marika's death only solidified Rochdale's reputation as Toronto's seediest apartment complex. Deaths at Rochdale were not uncommon, many of them being overdoses or accidental falls from the building. The following year, Rochdale experienced a drought of marijuana, and Mr. Robotham forged connections with a biker gang supposedly known as the Vagabonds to bring in pot from Mexico. Bikers were hired as security guards, and the drug culture edged closer to harder substances. These guards were known to keep attack dogs at the lobby, giving the impression of a fortress. Many of the new incoming residents were addicts and scoundrels seeking the lawless nature of the building. Debt was mounting, given the lack of financial drive, and police raids had become more frequent. There were at least 6 suicides recorded, amongst countless more drug overdoses. The government was frustrated with Rochdale's failure and sought to take over the property. Ironically, ongoing legal disputes kept it alive through the next few years. By 1973, local residents and politicians were consistently calling for Rochdale's closure, especially as gentrification of the area spiked. Financial pressures forced the sale of the Golden Lake campus to a group of occupants who kept its name as Rochdale Farm. In an interview, one of the buyers proudly stated that they set up a non-profit for the farm in a way that makes it nearly impossible to sell, securing a permanent refuge. Meanwhile, police raids continued to remove troublesome occupants at the college, as the building project made its last stand against closure. This drew the ire of the occupants who had found their place there, and many held out as long as possible. The weekly countercultural paper Two's Daily was still published through May of 1974, but the writing was on the wall for Rochdale College. May 30th, 1975. Police served the remaining residents with a final eviction notice, and in some cases used sledgehammers to break down doors and toss them out. They bolted the front door shut after the building was vacated. In one fell swoop, Rochdale College was now dismantled as an institution, forcing whoever was left to move on. It was 4 years before the building became the site of a new housing project, rechristened the Senator David A. Kroll Apartments. Having learned their lesson, the powers that be had a far different vision. There would never again be a Rochdale College. Though Rochdale College has mostly faded from the public's mind, its former residents still take pride in the college's existence. To them, it was emblematic emblematic of a freer time, and despite its troublesome history, it was not without merit. Even without a structured curriculum, it would be foolish to dismiss the impact it had on Toronto's underground culture. Amongst other creative ventures, it was the first home to Coach House books. Rochdale College shows how an idealistic experiment can foster many alternative lifestyles, from drug-induced self-discovery